Hello everyone, welcome to BioWorks. In my previous video, I have covered asexual reproduction in plants, and in today's video, I'll be covering introduction to sexual reproduction in plants and structure of a flower. Let's get started. Okay, so our topic for today is sexual reproduction in plants. Sexual reproduction in plants, and we will also look at the detailed structure of a flower in the later part of the video. Right now we will be focusing on what is sexual reproduction, how does it occur in plants, and where does it occur exactly. So in my previous video, if you guys have watched my previous video, you must be aware of what is sexual reproduction and how is it different when it is compared with asexual reproduction. So just to make a note, sexual reproduction in plants involves fusion of gametes, right? We all know that gametes are nothing but the sex cells or the cells that are involved in reproduction. So during sexual reproduction, there is fusion of gametes that take place. But of course, there is a time during which plants are able to produce gametes, right? When the plants reach maturity, they are able to produce the gametes. So in a life cycle of plant, let me mention that here, we can divide the life cycle of plant into two phases. So I'll mention that here, the phases in life of a plant. So there are two phases in a life of a plant. So the first phase is the juvenile phase, also called as vegetative phase, whereas the second phase is actually the reproductive phase. Now, it is in the reproductive phase that the fusion of gametes will take place. So what is juvenile phase? Juvenile phase will be the earlier phase right from birth up to the formation, or you could say maturity. When a plant matures, right, up to that time will be the juvenile phase, followed by the reproductive phase, during which fusion of gametes can take place. But you need to make a note that before fusion of gametes, there is an important process which is called as meiosis. I'll mention that below the second phase, an important process which is called as meiosis, which takes place in the reproductive phase. So meiosis is the process which leads to the formation of gametes, right? Meiosis is a very important process because it leads to the formation of gametes. These gametes are haploid. Please remember that. I'll make a note of it. These gametes are haploid, and when the gametes fuse, right, these haploid gametes, when they fuse, they will produce a diploid zygote. So if you have to represent that in a form of a simple an equation, you could say, I would write N to represent a haploid gamete. When it fuses with another gamete which is also haploid, so I'll represent with another N. It will lead to formation of a zygote which will be 2N. So over here, this is a gamete, N is a haploid gamete, right? Whereas 2N is a diploid zygote, right? So formation of gametes as well as fusion of gametes can take place in the reproductive phase in a life of a plant. Now, for convenience, to study the entire sexual reproduction in plants, we have divided sexual reproduction or the stages of sexual reproduction into 3 stages. So let me mention that over here. You could say stages of sexual reproduction in plants. So the 3 stages that occur in sequence, please remember that these are sequential events. So they occur in a particular sequence, one after the other. So the 3 stages of sexual reproduction in plants are pre-fertilization, followed by fertilization, which is followed by post-fertilization. Right? Now over here, the term pre means before. Right? So pre-fertilization meaning all the events that take place before fertilization. Then comes fertilization, which is the actual fusion of gametes. And then it is followed by post-fertilization, which will include all the events that occur after fertilization. So you will be aware that in pre-fertilization, we will be dealing with how the gametes are formed, right? Because gametes will be required for fertilization. So of course, in the pre-fertilization stage, we will be talking in detail about how the gametes are produced, both the male gamete and the female gamete. Then we will be talking about fertilization, where we will study how the 2 gametes fuse. Followed by post-fertilization, where we will be talking about how zygote is formed, what happens to the zygote, how it develops into the embryo. Now, before we go ahead, I will just give an introduction of which is the reproductive part or the main reproductive organ in a plant. I'm sure you guys are already aware of that, right? Yes, it is the flower. Flower is the main, I would write the reproductive part of a plant. It is the main reproductive part of a plant. And we will go into the detailed structure of a flower in the next section. Let us now understand structure of a flower. All those who are in grade 12 currently, this is going to be like a revision for y'all because y'all have already done this in your previous grade. And right now I'm going to draw the structure of a flower for you guys so that you will understand it in a better way. And we are going to now look at the various parts of a flower. All right, and while I draw the diagram, I'm going to explain or I'm going to make you understand why diagrams are very, very important in biology. So right now I'm drawing the middlemost part of a flower, which is the female part of a flower. And I'm going to complete the diagram soon. But meanwhile, let me tell you the importance of drawing good diagrams in biology. So when you attempt your answers in your exam paper, make sure you can draw relevant diagrams wherever possible. Right? Even if the answer or the question does not mention that you are supposed to draw a diagram, you can represent your answer in a form of a diagram. But make sure, do remember that the diagrams that you draw has to be neat, they have to be big enough, and they have to be clear enough so that the examiner who is checking your paper seems he or she does not lose interest while checking your paper. So you need to be very, very sure of that. Also make sure the diagram is completely labeled, right? You need to have all the important labels in your diagram. At least the important ones should not be missed out if at all you don't remember all of them. Okay, so I'm almost towards the end of the diagram. Yeah, now I'm going to label the parts here. Alright, we will start with the male part of a flower. I'm going to label this as the anther. Then this structure, the long cylindrical filamentous slender structure over here, is the filament. And I want you guys to guess what is anther and filament together called as. Well, yes, that is stamen, which is the male part of the flower. That's right. Now we will move on to labeling the female part of the flower, starting with the first one, the topmost part of the flower here. This is called as a stigma. I'll mention that here. This is the stigma. This is the style. This is the ovary. So stigma, style, and the ovary. All the three together make up the female part of the flower, which we call it as a pistil or a carpel. So there are two names over here for a female part of a flower. For a male part of a flower, we generally use the term stamen. Alright, so those were the male and the female parts of a flower. Let us now label the rest of the parts. So this is the sepal. This part of the flower, the swollen structure here, is called as the thalamus. Thalamus, or it is also called as receptacle. I am going to mention both the terms here. Receptacle or thalamus. This is the swollen part, and this stalk of the flower is called as a pedicel. Right, this is the part of the flower which is seen attached to the stem. So this is, in other words, also called as a stalk of the flower. The swollen portion of the stalk is called as a thalamus. Alright, I have forgotten to label ovule over here, so let me label that as well. This is the ovule inside the ovaries. Alright, I think I have labeled all of them except for the one that is petals. Right. Okay. So this is a detailed structure of a flower with all the important parts that are to be labeled. So I'm going to talk about each one of them and the function they perform. Alright, starting with the first one, as we labeled anther and filament first, so I will begin with that. So anther and filament are the two parts of stamen, and stamen is the male part of the flower. I will mention that over here. It is the male part of the flower, right? And the pistil is the female part of the flower. Okay. So anther is the site where pollen grains are formed, right? We all know that pollen grains are produced in plants during the process of meiosis, and it is the anther where the pollen grains are produced. And anther is seen attached to this long slender tube which is called as filament, which holds the anther at a height so that pollen grains can be easily released and they can be carried further to the stigma. Okay, then another label you see on the right hand side is petals. These are the petals which are generally brightly colored, and some of the flowers also release some kind of fragrance or some kind of scent. This is just to attract the insects during pollination. Then you have the female part of the flower which is right in the center. It consists of the stigma, style, and the ovary. Now all the three together make up the pistil or carpel, which is the female part of the flower. Over here, stigma is the part which receives the pollen grain from the anther during pollination. I will be talking about pollination in my future videos. Style is the long slender tube which connects the stigma and the ovary together. And ovary consists of ovules inside where the female gametes are produced. So basically the male gametes from the anther are supposed to reach up to the ovule for fertilization to take place, and the process which will assist over here is pollination. We will be talking about that in the next videos. And if you see the lower part of a flower here, these green color leaf-like structures are called as sepals, and sepals can perform photosynthesis. As you all know, they are green in color, so they do contain chlorophyll, so they are able to perform photosynthesis. Apart from that, sepals are also protective in nature when the flower is in a bud condition, right? You guys must have seen a flower when it is in a bud condition. The sepals kind of cover the flower externally. And then you have the pedicel, the stalk of the flower, and the swollen end of the pedicel is called as a thalamus, which has all the parts of the flower present on it. Let us now go ahead and understand what are the whorls of a flower. So I'm going to mention the term whorls over here. Whorls. So if you guys can guess the meaning of whorls here, that's right. Whorls is basically circular arrangement. Circular arrangement. Now what kind of arrangement I'm talking about? I am talking about arrangement of the different parts of the flower on the thalamus. Now if you look at this flower from the top angle, you will be able to notice that the outermost part will be the sepals and the innermost part will be the gynoecium, the center part, which is also called as a pistil. So these parts which are arranged in a circular pattern on the thalamus are called as whorls. So total there are 4 whorls in a flower. Starting with the first and the outermost part, I'm going to label the 4 whorls in the diagram itself. So in front of sepals, I'm going to write calyx here, calyx, which is the first whorl of a flower. So calyx is the outermost and the first whorl, which consists of individual members called as sepals. Then the second or the innermost whorl to the calyx comes the corolla, which consists of petals. So I'm going to write corolla here. Corolla is the second whorl of the flower, which consists of individual members called as petals. Then the third whorl, which is innermost 2 petals, is called as androecium. I'm going to mention that in front of stamens here. Androecium. So androecium becomes your third whorl, which consists of individual members called as stamens. And then the fourth whorl, the innermost whorl, which is right in the center, is the gynoecium. That's right. I'm going to mention gynoecium here. Alright. So I've mentioned all the 4 whorls in the diagram itself, starting with the calyx, corolla, androecium, and gynoecium. Now out of the 4 whorls I've mentioned, 2 of them are called as essential whorls and 2 of them are called as non-essential whorls. Can you guys guess which one of them are essential whorls? Yes, that's right. Stamen, that is androecium, and gynoecium will be categorized as essential whorls because they are directly involved in the process of reproduction. And corolla and calyx are called as non-essential whorls because they are not directly involved in the process of reproduction. Alright, that was all about the detailed structure of a flower.
So I hope the video was helpful to you all. Don't forget to hit the bell icon to get notified about my future uploads. Also, please feel free to post your questions or doubts in the comment section. Thank you.